The fog never truly lifted in Port Lament. It rolled in from the bay every evening, thick as wet wool, swallowing the abandoned cannery buildings and the rusting cranes that stood like skeletal mourners along the waterfront. By midnight, the world shrank to a circle of damp visibility roughly 10 feet across. Sounds traveled strangely here, foghorns distorted into whale song, seabirds muted to ghost cries, the distant rumble of waves gnawing at the breakwater. Beneath the old railroad bridge, Silas Rook listened to all of it from his nest of salvaged blankets and cardboard. He was 17, maybe 18. The dates had stopped mattering somewhere between his mother's funeral and the third foster home. Now he measured time in tides and hunger, in the migratory patterns of the gulls that stole his food if he wasn't quick enough. The bridge was his kingdom, a forgotten stretch of the coastal line abandoned decades ago when the shipping industry collapsed and took Port Lament's reason to exist with it. The hatch was an accident. Silas had been prying up loose chunks of concrete near the bridge's eastern footing, searching for anything metallic enough to trade at the scrapyard 3 miles inland. His fingers, calloused and permanently grimy, found a seam that shouldn't have existed. It was too straight, too precise. No municipal construction crew cut lines like this. He cleared away the moss and decades of accumulated silt. Beneath it lay a circular hatch, roughly 4 feet across, made of a metal that didn't oxidize. The surface was dark, faintly warm despite the November chill bleeding through his thrift store jacket. Around its rim, symbols pressed into the alloy shifted when he wasn't looking directly at them. Silas blinked hard, convinced hunger was playing tricks on his vision. He stared at one particular symbol, a spiral bisected by 3 diagonal slashes, until his eyes watered. It stayed still. When he glanced away to grab his crowbar, the symbol reconfigured itself in his peripheral vision, the slashes becoming a lattice of intersecting curves. "I'm losing my mind," he muttered. The sound of his own voice was strange. He rarely spoke aloud anymore. The crowbar found the seam and he heaved. The hatch resisted for exactly 3 seconds, then opened with a sigh of equalizing pressure, as if it had been waiting for permission. The air that rushed out smelled of electricity and something floral, something that didn't belong in a crumbling industrial town in the Pacific Northwest. A vibration rolled through the concrete beneath his knees, a deep, rhythmic pulse like a heartbeat transmitted through stone. Silas stared into the opening. The expected darkness wasn't there. Instead, a spiral staircase descended into a soft amber glow, its steps made of the same impossible alloy, its walls inscribed with thousands of those shifty, unfixed symbols. The air was warm. The staircase seemed to breathe. His rational mind screamed at him to close the hatch and run. But Silas Rook had been running for years, and it had never once made things better. He was reaching for the first step when the headlight bloomed through the fog above him. It was a single beam, piercing through the gray like a needle through gauze, and it came from the railroad bridge, from the tracks that hadn't seen a train since before Silas was born. The light was too white, too clean for any locomotive. It didn't flicker or waver. It simply was, and it was getting brighter. Silas froze with one hand on the hatch cover and one foot hovering over the abyss. No engine sound, no clatter of wheels on rails, just that impossible light gliding through the fog in perfect silence, sweeping the bridge as if searching for something. Searching for someone. The vibration in the concrete intensified, and deep within the hatch, something woke up enough to whisper directly into the architecture of Silas's thoughts, using words he shouldn't have been able to understand. "Bearer approaching. Remain, remain, remain." Above, the headlight stopped directly over the bridge footing. Directly over him. Silas Rook made a choice that would either save his species or doom it. He descended into the hatch and pulled the cover shut behind him, plunging himself into the amber glow just as heavy footsteps began crossing the railroad bridge overhead. footsteps that walked with the weight and precision of something that had traveled a very long way to find exactly this place. Part 2. The train that shouldn't exist. The hatch sealed with a sound like a closing throat. Silas pressed his back against the stairwell wall, breathing through his nose, listening to the footsteps above. The metal cover didn't completely block sound. It transmitted vibration, and with each footfall, tiny cascades of dust sifted from the seams in the ancient concrete. 7 distinct gates, maybe 8. The footfalls were too regular, landing in sequences that no human patrol would use, perfect intervals, no variation in weight distribution. Each step was identical to the one before it. Then the voices began, filtered through something electronic. The signal terminates within a 5-meter radius of this position. The translator rendered the words in flat, accentless English, but beneath the translation, Silas could hear the original speech, a series of clicks and modulated tones that no human throat could produce. Surface scan negative for access points. There, a second voice deeper. Thermal anomaly beneath the bridge footing, venting warm air through microfractures in the concrete. The ship's core is awake in cycling atmosphere. Ship. The word hit Silas like a physical blow. He looked down the spiral staircase, at the amber glow pulsing gently hundreds of feet below, and felt the pieces of a puzzle he didn't know he was solving click into place. The impossible metal, the shifting symbols, the warmth and the floral smell and the voice that had spoken directly into his mind. There was a vessel buried beneath Port Lament. It had been here longer than the bridge, longer than the town, longer than the coastal railroad that had once carried lumber and fish to the inland cities. And someone, something, had just crossed a great distance to find it. The core has likely bonded with a local life form by now, the first voice said. Vorathan technology requires a biological interface. Find the bonded organism, extract the core, terminate the organism if it resists. Understood. Extraction lead. Silas's survival instincts, honed by years of navigating hostile streets and predatory adults, finally overrode his shock. He began descending the staircase, moving as quietly as his worn sneakers would allow. Each step was deliberate. The amber glow intensified as he went deeper, and the walls transitioned from rough concrete to that strange, dark alloy, then to something that looked almost like bone, curved surfaces that joined seamlessly, warm to the touch, faintly translucent in places where what might have been circulatory systems pulsed behind the material. The staircase ended at a doorway shaped like a teardrop. Beyond it lay a chamber that took the breath from Silas's lungs. The ship was embedded in the bedrock like a dagger thrust into the Earth's crust. It was angular where human vessels were curved, with swept-forward protrusions that resembled wings folded tight against a fuselage. The hull was the color of deep water, and across its surface, patterns of light rippled in response to Silas's presence, waves of soft gold that converged toward where he stood. The ship was maybe 60 feet long, a scout vessel his mind supplied, though he had no idea where that knowledge came from. It was ancient but alive, its semi-organic systems having survived 2 centuries in the dark by entering a state of hibernation so profound it resembled death. As Silas stepped into the chamber, a seam appeared in the hull and dilated open like an iris. "Bearer," the voice whispered in his skull. It was gentler now, almost reverent. "You have returned to me. I have waited so long, so very long." "I've never been here before," Silas whispered. "Your genetic memory carries the resonance of the first pilot. You are compatible. The others above are not. They will destroy us both if you allow them entry." Above, muffled by hundreds of feet of stone and technology, an impact echoed. They had found the hatch. "They're scavengers," Silas said. "You called them something else. Cressolans." "Carrion feeders. They consume what others have built. They have no honor, no claim. If you bond with me, I can defend us. But the bond is permanent. You will never be only human again. Another impact, cracking concrete, a distant hiss of hot metal cutting through alloy. Silas thought about Port Lament, about the foster homes that had shuffled him like cargo, about the cold nights under the bridge and the hunger, and the absolute indifference of a world that had no place for a boy with nothing. He stepped toward the open iris. Show me how. Part 3, The Descent. The interior of the scout vessel closed around Silas like a living cocoon. Walls that had appeared rigid from the outside now flexed subtly, adjusting to his dimensions, his body temperature, the cadence of his breathing. The air was warm and rich with oxygen, carrying that same floral undertone he'd noticed at the hatch. Every surface glowed with a soft, directionless light that seemed to emanate from the material itself. A central command chair, the only seat in the small cockpit, swiveled toward him. It wasn't built for a human body. The proportions were wrong, the angles designed for something taller and narrower, with joints that bent in unfamiliar directions. As Silas approached, the chair's surface rippled and reconfigured, its semi-organic structure reshaping itself to accommodate his frame. "Please sit," the ship said. Its voice was no longer an intrusive whisper but a clear presence in his mind, distinct from his own thoughts yet somehow complementary to them. "I have adjusted for your morphology. The neural interface will require physical contact with your spinal column and both temporal lobes." Silas hesitated. "What happens if I do this, exactly?" "I will map your neural architecture. Your memories, your instincts, your cognitive patterns will become the template for my tactical and navigational systems. In exchange, you will receive access to my sensory arrays, my linguistic databases, and my memory archives. You will know what I know. You will feel what I feel." That sounds like a lot. The process is overwhelming for most species. Vorathan pilots train for decades before attempting a first bond. You have no training, but you have something they lacked. What's that? Your species experiences fear and proceeds anyway. My scans indicate elevated cortisol, adrenaline, and a neurotransmitter I do not recognize, one that appears to govern protective attachment. You are terrified, but you are also angry on my behalf. You have already decided to protect me from the Cressolans above. Silas didn't have an answer for that. He sat down in the chair. The contact was immediate and total. Gel-like tendrils extended from the headrest, pressing gently against his temples and the base of his skull. They were warm at first, then almost imperceptible, as if they had found a way to interface without triggering his skin's pressure receptors. The chair's back opened to accommodate his spine, and something cool and precise aligned itself with his vertebrae. Then the world dissolved. He was falling through a cascade of sensory data, images, sounds, smells, emotional impressions that belonged to someone else, something else. He saw the stars as the ship had seen them 2 centuries ago, a sprawling tapestry of light and void, navigated by beings who measured distance in lifetimes and battles in honor. He felt the terror of the crash, the death of the pilot, the long silence of hibernation. He experienced the slow, aching loneliness of an intelligence designed for partnership, left alone in the dark with nothing but its thoughts and a beacon that would not activate until a compatible mind drew near. When Silas opened his eyes again, he was weeping. He didn't know why. "The bond is complete," the ship said, and now its voice held warmth. "Our neural patterns are synchronized. I have accessed your linguistic centers. I can speak to you in your native tongue without translation delay, and I have seen what the Cressolans are doing above us." "What are they doing?" "They have cut through the hatch. They are descending the spiral staircase. Estimated time to entry, 4 minutes. Recommendation: initiate defensive protocols." Silas wiped his face with a shaking hand. The grief wasn't his, but it felt like his. 200 years of solitude, and now someone wanted to destroy the only thing that had survived it. "No," he said, "no defensive protocols." "Bearer, You said the Cressolans are scavengers. That means they want something valuable enough to sell. What's the most valuable thing on this ship? The organic core, my central consciousness. It is a Vorathin artifact of incalculable worth. The Cressolans would trade it to the highest bidder or dissect it for technological secrets. Can you show me a schematic of this chamber? All the approach vectors, all the structural weaknesses. An image bloomed in Silas's mind. A perfect three-dimensional map of the underground hangar, the spiral staircase, and the 7 Cressolans descending it in tight formation. What are you planning? Silas Rook, 17 years old and homeless, survivor of a system that had tried to break him, smiled without humor. I'm going to make them regret coming down here. Part 4, The Crash and the Signal. The memory upload came in fragments, jagged and incomplete, like shards of a mirror reflecting someone else's life. Silas experienced it through the ship's sensory logs, the data streaming directly into his consciousness while his body remained in the command chair. Time became fluid. Past and present overlapped until he couldn't tell where the memory ended and reality began. 212 standard years ago. The Vorathin scout vessel Vecrith's Talon was fleeing through an uncharted system, its hull bleeding atmosphere from a dozen breaches. Behind it, a Cressolan harvester ship, 3 times its mass, armed with illegal disruptor cannons, closed the distance with predatory patience. The Vorathin pilot, a warrior named Drethkor, had been ambushed during a routine patrol. His wingmates were already dead. The Cressolans had been stalking this sector for weeks, waiting for isolated Vorathin vessels to pick off. They knew our patrol patterns, the ship said, its voice thick with grief it had carried for 2 centuries. Someone betrayed us. Drethkor never learned who. The chase had carried them into an uncharted system with a single yellow star and a small blue planet teeming with biological diversity. Drethkor, bleeding from shrapnel wounds and running on combat stimulants, had made a desperate choice. He plotted a collision course with the planet's surface, timing his descent to use the atmosphere as a shield against the Cressolan weapons. The crash had been catastrophic. The Talon plowed into the coastline of what would someday be called Oregon, burying itself in the bedrock. Drethkor survived impact but not his injuries. In his final moments, he activated the ship's distress beacon, programming it with a specific command. Activate only when a compatible biological signature is within bonding range. We cannot allow the Cressolans to claim the core. We cannot allow anyone unworthy. Then he died and the ship slept, and the centuries passed. Who was he signaling? Silas asked, though he already sensed the answer forming in the ship's shared consciousness. The Vorathin High Command. The distress beacon was designed to reach our people, but the signal was weak, distorted by the planet's geology. It has been broadcasting for 200 years, but only in the last decade has it reached Vorathin listening posts. And now they're coming. They are already here. The Cressolans intercepted the signal first. They were closer, their listening networks more extensive. But the Vorathin war fleet is behind them. 3 destroyers. They will arrive within hours. Silas processed this, his mind working faster than it ever had, accelerated by the neural link. The Cressolans want to steal the core before the Vorathin arrive. They're racing the clock. Correct. The Cressolan boarding party above us is operating with urgency. If they cannot extract the core, they will destroy it to deny the Vorathin their technology. And the Vorathin, what happens when they get here? Silence. The ship's consciousness withdrew slightly, a tell that Silas was learning to recognize. The Vorathin will reclaim what is theirs. The Vorathin do not negotiate with lesser species. The Vorathin will not risk their technology falling into the hands of a primitive civilization. They'll destroy Port Lament. They will destroy the entire coastal region to ensure no trace of my existence remains in human possession. That is protocol. That is honor. A Vorathin vessel cannot be allowed to contaminate an uncontacted species. Silas sat in the command chair, his hands gripping the armrests that had reshaped to fit his palms. Above him, the Cressolans were cutting through the final barrier. Outside, 3 warships from a warrior race were burning toward Earth with annihilation in their orders. And somewhere in the foggy town above, people who had never acknowledged his existence were going about their lives, unaware that their survival depended on a homeless teenager and an alien ship buried in the dark. "Okay," Silas said quietly. "Let's deal with the Cressolans first, then we figure out how to stop a war fleet." Bearer, the probability of success against 3 Vorathin destroyers is negligible by any tactical assessment. "I didn't ask for the odds, I asked for a plan." Another pause. The ship's lights flickered, and Silas felt something new in their shared connection, something that might have been respect. "There is one possibility, but it will require you to do something no Vorathin has ever done." "I'm not Vorathin." "No, you are something much stranger, proceeding with defensive engagement. The Cressolans have breached the outer door." The teardrop-shaped entrance to the hangar exploded inward, in a shower of molten metal and white-hot sparks. Part 5. The SCAVNGRS Ultimatum. They moved like oil spills given legs. 7 figures spread out across the chamber entrance, their forms wrapped in environment suits that gleamed with a greasy iridescence. Under the suits, their bodies were vaguely bipedal but wrong in the joints, elbows that bent too far, necks that articulated in 3 directions, hands with too many fingers that tapered into needle points. Their faceplates were opaque, reflecting the amber glow of the chamber like pools of dark water. The lead Cressolan stepped forward, and its translator unit crackled to life with that same flat, clinical English. "Bonded organism. You are identified as a local sapient. Your species designation is not in our databases, which makes you either very new or very unimportant. Surrender the Vorathin organic core, and you will be transported to the nearest neutral station with sufficient currency to establish yourself. Resist, and you will be dissected alongside the vessel." Silas remained in the command chair, hidden within the ship's hull. Through the neural link, he saw the Cressolans as the ship saw them, thermal signatures overlaid with threat assessments, weak points highlighted in pools in red, kill zones mapped across the chamber floor. "They are lying," the ship said. "Cressolans never leave witnesses. Their species survived the scouring wars by erasing every trace of their scavenging operations. The moment you surrender me, they will kill you." "I know," Silas murmured. "I've met people like them before." He thought about the foster father who had smiled while locking the refrigerator, the social workers who had promised help and delivered paperwork, the cops who had rousted him from doorways with nightsticks and lectures about civic responsibility. The world was full of predators who offered you safety with one hand while hiding a blade in the other. The Cressolans weren't alien to him, they were familiar. "What's the ship's combat capability, honestly?" "I am a scout vessel, not a warship. My offensive systems are limited to point defense countermeasures and a single forward disruptor that requires manual targeting. Against 7 armed boarders in a confined space, our probability of survival is 32%. That's higher than I expected. What about the ship's internal systems? Atmosphere, gravity, life support?" "All fully functional. What are you considering?" Silas opened his eyes. His grin was sharp and entirely without joy. "I'm considering that they're standing in a sealed chamber full of breathable atmosphere, and that the ship can control every molecule of it." The Cressolan leader Vex, according to the ship's intercepted comm signals, took another step forward. His weapon was out now, a slender rifle that hummed with contained energy. His 6 companions fanned out behind him, covering all angles of approach. "Final offer, bonded organism. Surrender the core. You have 30 seconds to comply." Silas spoke, and through the ship's external speakers, his voice filled the chamber. It was steady, calm, the voice of someone who had already done the math and accepted the outcome. You came a long way for something that doesn't belong to you. I'm going to give you one chance to leave. Take your ship, leave this system, and don't come back. Vex made a sound that the translator rendered as laughter. A primitive species making demands. Delightful. Your world hasn't even achieved orbital flight, and you think you can threaten us. 20 seconds, Silas said. You're stalling. The Vorathin fleet won't arrive in time to save you. We have jammed the local subspace bands. No one knows we're here. 15 seconds. Vex raised his weapon. Kill the organism, extract the core manually. The 6 other Cressolans opened fire simultaneously. And Silas gave the ship a single command: depressurize the chamber, now. The atmosphere in the hangar vented through emergency ducts with a shriek that was felt rather than heard. The sudden decompression didn't kill the Cressolans. Their environment suits sealed automatically, but it did something more important. It threw them off balance. The explosive rush of air caught them mid-stride, sending 2 of them tumbling. Their formation shattered. In that moment of chaos, the ship's point defense systems activated. Slivers of hyperaccelerated alloy punched through the darkness, each one guided by Silas's targeting instincts. He wasn't a trained gunner, but the neural link translated his intentions directly into action. He thought there, and the ship fired there. He thought dodge, and the ship adjusted for the Cressolans' evasive patterns. 2 Cressolans went down in the first volley. A third lost its weapon arm. Vex howled something in his native language, untranslated raw fury, and fired his disruptor directly at the ship's hull. The blast scored a burning line across the Talon's flank, and Silas felt it as a lance of white-hot pain through the neural link. Hull breach in Section 4, the ship reported, its voice strained. Containment fields holding. Recommend immediate retaliation. Silas's hands moved across controls that hadn't existed before the ship reshaped them for his fingers. The disruptor cannon, dormant for 2 centuries, hummed to life. His targeting reticle settled on Vex. Last chance, Silas said. Leave. Vex raised his weapon for another shot. Silas fired. The disruptor blast caught Vex centermass and erased him from existence in a flash of actinic light. What remained of the Cressolan boarding party scattered, firing wildly, but they were leaderless now, their formation broken, their exit cut off. The firefight lasted less than a minute. When it was over, Silas sat in the command chair, breathing hard, staring at the debris field that had been 7 living beings. The ship's lights pulsed gently, a steady rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. Bearer, I am detecting an outgoing transmission from the Cressolan harvester ship in orbit. Vex sent a final message before engaging us. The Vorathin warfleet intercepted it. They know the core has been bonded to a human. And they have increased speed. Estimated arrival 47 minutes. Silas closed his eyes. Outside, somewhere in the fog, sirens were beginning to wail. The people of Port Lament had seen the flashes from the bridge. They were waking up to a world that had just become much larger and much more dangerous. Tell me about that plan, he said. The one no Vorathin has ever done. Part 6, First Flight, First Blood. The Cressolan harvester ship hung in low orbit like a tick on the belly of the world. Its designation, according to the Talon's databases, was Vrit's Fortune, a mid-sized scavenger vessel retrofitted with military-grade disruptor cannons and a stealth system that had clearly failed if the Vorathin had tracked it here. It was crewed by 18 Cressolans, 14 now, after Silas had dealt with the boarding party, and its captain was screaming into every subspace channel she could access. The Talon translated the transmissions automatically, piping them into Silas's consciousness as he guided the scout vessel through its pre-flight sequence. Repeat, this is Vrit's Fortune to any Vorathin vessels in system. We have located your lost technology. We are prepared to negotiate its return in exchange for safe passage and standard salvage rights. The bonded organism is a native of this system. Repeat, the core has bonded with a local. The technology has been compromised by a primitive species. Acknowledge, please. They're terrified, Silas said. The Vorathin consider bonding with uncontacted species to be a capital offense against their honor code. The Cressilans know this. They are attempting to deflect blame before the fleet arrives. Will it work? No, the Cressilans will be destroyed regardless. So will this town. So will you unless we act now. The Talon rose through the concealed launch shaft on a column of gravitic force, its hull shedding 2 centuries of accumulated rock and silt. The underground chamber collapsed behind it, sealing the evidence of its long burial. Above, the concrete of the railroad bridge cracked and fell away, and the fog of Port Lament parted for the first time in decades as the alien vessel punched through into open sky. Silas saw the town from above, the cannery roofs, the empty streets, the few cars pulling over as drivers stared upward at something their minds couldn't process. He saw the headlights of the police cruiser racing toward the bridge. He saw the fog rolling back in, erasing the evidence. Then the Talon climbed past the cloud layer, and Port Lament became a memory. Approaching orbital insertion, the Harvester ship has detected us. They are charging weapons. Can we outrun them? Not in atmosphere. Their engines are designed for cargo hauling, high thrust, low maneuverability. We are faster in void, but we must reach void first. The first disruptor blast lanced past the Talon's port wing, close enough that Silas felt the heat through the hull. The Cressilans weren't aiming to disable. They were aiming to kill. Evasive pattern, Silas said, and the ship responded before he finished the thought, jinking hard to starboard. Another blast. Another near miss. The Talon's point defense systems tracked incoming fire and spat countermeasures, clouds of reflective particles that scattered disruptor energy into harmless spectra of light. They broke atmosphere at Mach 14, and the stars opened around them like a million watching eyes. We are in void, the ship said. Harvester vessel pursuing. Their targeting systems are locking. Recommend immediate engagement before they acquire solution. Silas had never flown anything more complex than a stolen bicycle, but the neural link translated his instincts into maneuvers, his intentions into tactics. He thought about the alleyways of Port Lament, the routes he'd memorized to evade police and truancy officers, the shortcuts through condemned buildings and drainage culverts. The Talon dove through the wreckage of a decommissioned satellite, using the debris as cover. The Harvester ship followed, its bulkier frame crashing through the obstacles rather than navigating around them. Chunks of solar panels and titanium struts bounced off its hull without leaving scratches. They're not even slowing down, Silas muttered. Their shields are military grade. Our disruptor cannon cannot penetrate them in a direct engagement. We must find another approach. Silas scanned the tactical display, his mind accelerated by the neural link, processing data at speeds no unaugmented human could match. The Harvester ship was closing, 90 seconds to weapons range. The Talon's disruptor was too weak. The point defense systems were purely defensive. Then he saw it. A gap in the Cressillan ship's shield geometry, a flickering instability near the engine exhaust ports, where thermal venting created a momentary weakness every 12 seconds. There, Silas said, highlighting the spot. Can we hit that? Possible. The window is 0.7 seconds. My targeting systems cannot lock that quickly. The shot would require manual firing with biological reaction time. I'm biological. Give me manual control. The ship hesitated. Bearer, the probability of a successful shot is 4%. Better than 0. Silas took the controls and flew the Talon directly at the Harvester ship. It was insanity. A head-on charge against a larger, better-armed opponent with no cover, no tricks, no escape route. The Cresseland gunners opened fire with everything they had, filling the space between the two vessels with a web of disruptor energy. The Talon spun and twisted through the barrage, Seela's feeling every near miss as a jolt of sympathetic pain through the bond. 12 seconds, the shield flickered, Seela's missed the shot. 11 seconds, the ship screamed warnings, hull temperature critical. The Cresselands were landing hits now, scorching the Talon's armor. Seela's ignored the pain and lined up another shot. 12 seconds, the shield flickered, he fired. The disruptor blast slipped through the exhaust port and detonated inside the Harvester ship's engine core. The secondary explosion tore the Vreet's Fortune in half, spilling atmosphere and debris across low orbit. Seela's sat in the command chair, shaking, as the wreckage tumbled past his viewports. Cresseland vessel destroyed, the ship reported. We are receiving a transmission from the approaching Vorathan fleet. They are demanding identification. What should I tell them? Seela's looked at the burning debris, at the planet turning below him, at the warships that were now 41 minutes from Earth. Tell them the truth, he said. Tell them the bonded pilot of the Vecrith's Talon requests a parley under the ancient codes, and tell them I'm prepared to issue a challenge. A challenge, bearer, the only challenge that carries weight with a Vorathan war fleet is the trial of worth. No human has ever. I know, Seela said, that's the point. Part 7, the weight of the world. The Vorathan destroyers emerged from their approach trajectory, like blades sliding from a sheath. 3 vessels, each 1/8 times the Talon's mass, arrayed in a combat delta that spoke of military discipline so ingrained it had become instinct. Their hulls were angular and dark, bristling with weapons emplacements that tracked the tiny scout vessel with cold precision. They did not fire. They did not hail. They simply arrived, filling the orbital space around Earth with a presence that made the Cresseland Harvester look like a child's toy. On the surface below, the skis were going insane. Seela's watched through the Talon's sensors as military aircraft scrambled from bases across the Western Hemisphere. NORAD was screaming at every frequency. News networks were interrupting regular programming with grainy footage of the orbital battle's aftermath. Governments were waking up to the reality that humanity was not alone, and that their first contact was happening without their participation. He felt a pang of sympathy for them. They'd had no warning, no preparation, just a sudden apocalypse in their skis and a teenager at the center of it. The Vorathan flagship is responding, the ship said. They are transmitting in the old codes. They acknowledge your request for parley. They are curious. Curious is good. Curious means they haven't decided to glass the planet yet. Curious also means they are analyzing you, your biological data, your species profile, your planetary defenses. They are calculating threat assessments and cultural compatibility indices. This is standard first contact protocol when an uncontacted species demonstrates unexpected technological capability. They're deciding whether we're worth talking to or whether they should just wipe us out. Essentially, yes. The flagship's transmission came through in perfect, unaccented English. The Vorathan had clearly accessed the Talon's linguistic databases. Bonded pilot of the Vecrith's Talon, you are identified as a native of this system, species designation, human. Your planet is not registered in the contacted species accord. Your civilization has not achieved faster-than-light capability. By the terms of galactic law, you should not be in possession of Vorathan military technology. Explain. Seela's took a breath. The neural link steadied his heart rate, regulated his cortisol, kept his voice even when he spoke. This vessel crashed on my world 200 years ago. Its pilot died of his injuries. The ship activated its distress beacon and waited. I found it by accident. The bonding was not my choice, but it's done. Where is the Cresseland boarding party that preceded us? Dead, I killed them. A pause. The Talon translated sub-channel communications between the Vorathin commanders, quick, terse exchanges that carried notes of surprise and something that might have been approval. You killed 7 armed Cressilans and destroyed their harvester vessel, alone, with no military training. I had help, Silas patted the Talon's console, and I had motivation. They wanted to kill me and dissect my ship. Your ship, the Vorathin commander's voice held a new quality. You consider the Talon yours. It bonded with me, its pilot is dead, I'm all it has, so yes, it's mine. Another pause. Longer this time. Silas could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The 3 warships, the panicking planet below, the entire course of human history balanced on whatever he said next. You claim to be prepared to issue a challenge, the commander said. The only challenge recognized by Vorathin military code is the trial of worth. You do not look like a warrior. I'm not, but I'm the only one who can do this. Your code says that a bonded pilot has the right to claim their vessel by proving themselves in single combat against a designated champion. I'm claiming that right here and now. The sub-channel traffic exploded. They are debating, the Talon whispered. Some are arguing that you have no standing under their codes because your species is uncontacted. Others are pointing out that the trial of worth has no species restriction. It is an ancient tradition that predates the modern accord. If they refuse, they dishonor their ancestors. What happens if they accept? You will face a Vorathin warrior in unarmed combat. No weapons, no armor, no technological assistance. The trial ends when one combatant yields or dies. Silas looked at his hands. They were thin, scarred, calloused from years of survival. He had never thrown a punch in his life. He had never trained in any martial discipline. He was 17 years old, malnourished, and running on adrenaline and borrowed courage. Can I win? Vorathin warriors train for decades. They are faster than you, stronger than you, and their pain tolerance exceeds human norms by a factor of 3. In a direct confrontation, your probability of victory is functionally 0. That's not what I asked. I asked if I can win. The ship was silent for a long moment. Then, with something that sounded almost like affection. You are the most adaptable species I have ever encountered. You bond with things that should reject you. You survive situations that should kill you. You fight battles you cannot win and somehow find a way. I do not know if you can defeat a Vorathin champion, but I know you will not stop until your heart ceases to beat. And sometimes that is enough. The flagship's channel opened again. Human pilot, the Vorathin High Command has reviewed your claim. By the authority vested in me as fleet commander, I grant your request for trial of worth. You will board the flagship Karath's Wrath and face our champion. If you prevail, the Vecrith's Talon is yours by right of blood and will. If you fall, your world will be quarantined and your species placed under observation for a period of not less than 1,000 years. Do you accept these terms? Silas thought about Port Lament, about the fog and the bridge and the cold nights, about the people who had looked through him like he was already a ghost, about a world that had given him nothing and asked nothing in return. It wasn't much of a world, but it was his. I accept, he said. Part 8, The Drifter's Gambit. The docking bay of the Karath's Wrath was a cathedral built for giants. The ceiling arched 50 feet overhead, ribbed with structural supports that glowed with the same amber light as the Talon's interior. The deck plates were scarred from centuries of military use, gouges from landing gear, scorch marks from thruster wash, the accumulated wear of a warship that had seen countless battles across countless systems. Silas walked down the Talon's ramp and faced his welcoming committee. 12 Vorathin warriors stood in perfect formation, their armor gleaming like liquid shadow. They were tall, 7 feet at minimum, with builds that suggested power and speed in equal measure. Their faces were hidden behind full helmets, but their body language radiated controlled aggression. Every one of them was armed. Every one of them was watching him with the kind of intensity that predators reserved for unexpected prey. At their head stood the fleet commander. Her armor was distinguished by a crest of interlocking blades mounted on the shoulder pauldrons, and her helmet was tucked under her arm, revealing a face that was both alien and startlingly expressive. Her skin was the color of deep copper, textured with fine scales that caught the light. Her eyes were large, vertically pupilled, and utterly unreadable. "I am Commander Vash-Tel," she said. "You are the human who killed 7 Cressolans." "My name is Silas Rook." Silas Rook. She tested the syllables, her accent rendering them strange and formal. "You understand the terms of the trial?" "I do. Our champion has been selected. Combat will take place in the Ring of Judgment with the full command staff as witnesses. The trial will be recorded and transmitted to the Vorathin High Council. The outcome is binding." "Understood." Vash-Tel studied him for a moment. Her nostrils flared slightly, sampling his scent, perhaps, or reading something in his biochemistry that her species could detect. "You are afraid," she said. "It wasn't an accusation." "Of course I am." "Yet you came anyway. Why?" Silas thought about all the answers he could give. About duty and honor and saving his world. About proving something to a society that had discarded him. About the ship waiting behind him, the one creature in the universe that had chosen him and been chosen in return. He settled on the simplest truth. Because someone had to. Vash-Tel's expression shifted. The scales around her eyes tightened in a way that might have been respect. "Follow me." The Ring of Judgment was a circular arena sunk into the flagship's central deck. Its walls were lined with observation galleries, and those galleries were packed with Vorathin crew members who had gathered to witness the impossible, a primitive species challenging their finest warrior. Silas stripped off his jacket and the threadbare shirt beneath it. His torso was thin, the ribs visible beneath pale skin. Scars marked his back and arms, gifts from the foster system, from street fights, from years of surviving in places where survival was never guaranteed. The Vorathin champion entered from the opposite side of the ring. He was larger than the others, his muscles moving like cables beneath scaled skin. He wore no armor. His face was a mask of ritual scars, each one representing a victory in single combat. His name, Silas had been told, was Gorek Varn. He had served the Vorathin military for 47 standard years. He had never been defeated. The chamber fell silent. "Combatants," Vash-Tel's voice boomed from the observation gallery. "The trial of worth has been invoked. The challenger, Silas Rook of the species human, claims ownership of the bonded vessel Vekrith's Talon. The champion, Gorek Varn, defends the honor of the Vorathin fleet. Combat will continue until one yields or dies. Begin." Gorek Varn moved first. He was fast, faster than anything Silas had ever seen. The distance between them vanished in a heartbeat, and the first blow caught Silas in the chest before he could even raise his arms. He felt ribs crack. The impact launched him backward into the arena wall. "Get up," the Talon whispered through their bond, still active across the void of space. "He will not wait for you to recover." Silas rolled to his feet as Gorek's second strike cratered the deck where his head had been. The champion's follow-up was a sweeping kick that caught Silas in the thigh and sent him spinning. Pain exploded through his leg. Something tore. "His reach exceeds yours by 41%. Close distance. Inside his guard is your only chance." Silas lunged forward, ignoring the fire in his chest and leg. Gorek's third strike was a downward hammer blow meant to crush his skull. Silas twisted, took the impact on his shoulder instead, collarbone snapping with a sound like dry wood, and drove his forehead into Gorek's throat. It was the only weapon he had left. The Vorathin champion staggered. The blow had landed on a cluster of nerve bundles that the Talon had identified through its combat analysis. Not enough to kill, not even enough to seriously injure, but enough to surprise. Silas followed up with his good hand, driving his knuckles into the same spot. Once, twice. Gorek's arms came down to protect his throat, and Silas stomped on the champion's instep with all the force his broken body could muster. Gorek roared, pain and fury mixed, and backhanded Silas across the ring. The deck plates came up hard. Silas tasted blood. His vision was swimming, his body a symphony of agony. Through the neural link, the Talon was feeding him tactical data, but the data was increasingly dire. 3 broken ribs, fractured collarbone, internal bleeding. Concussion probability, high. Bearer, you must yield. Not yet. You cannot win this fight. You have demonstrated exceptional courage. There is no dishonor in yielding. Silas pushed himself up. His left arm hung useless. His right leg barely supported his weight. He faced the Vorathan champion, who was watching him with something that might have been confusion. "Why do you continue?" Gorek Varn asked. His voice was deep, resonant, tinged with an accent that made the English words sound ancient. "You are broken. You cannot defeat me." Silas spat blood onto the deck. "You're right, I can't beat you, I can't overpower you, I can't outfight you, but here's the thing." He took a shuffling step forward. "I don't have to win, I just have to not lose." Gorek's brow furrowed. "I do not understand." "The trial continues until one of us yields or dies. You're a warrior, 47 years of combat, never defeated. Your honor won't let you yield to a primitive, and I—" Silas took another step. His leg screamed. He ignored it. "I've been broken before. I've been beaten. I've been left for dead in alleys and under bridges, and I'm still here. You want to know why?" Gorek said nothing. "Because I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to quit. The system tried to break me. The streets tried to kill me. The Cressalans tried to dissect me. And I'm still standing. You're going to have to kill me, Gorek Varn, because I will never yield. My species doesn't know how." The champion stared at him. In the observation gallery, Vashtel leaned forward. Gorek Varn raised his fist for the killing blow. Silas met his eyes and did not flinch. The blow did not fall. "I yield," Gorek Varn said. The chamber erupted in chaos. Warriors shouted. Commanders demanded explanations. The observation galleries dissolved into a storm of raised voices and conflicting opinions. Gorek Varn ignored all of it. He looked at Silas, and there was something new in his eyes, something that might have been recognition. "I have fought 100 battles," the champion said, quiet enough that only Silas could hear. "I have killed warriors of a dozen species. I have never faced an enemy who knew they were defeated and refused to accept it. What are you?" "Human," Silas said, "just human." "Then I yield to humanity, not to your strength, to your refusal. It is a terrifying thing. The Vorathan will need to understand it." He turned and walked out of the ring. Vashtel came to Silas in the medical bay 3 hours later. The Vorathan healers had done what they could, bone knitters and tissue regenerators that worked miracles on human physiology. He would heal. It would take time, but he would heal. "The trial of worth is complete," she said. "The recording has been transmitted to the High Council. The Veckrith's Talon is yours. Your world is granted provisional uncontacted status, with a recommendation for accelerated evaluation under the Contacted Species Accord." Silas nodded. "What does that mean for Earth?" "It means we will be watching. Your species is unprecedented. The High Council will debate your case for years, perhaps decades. But you have bought your world time. What you do with it is your own affair." "And you, what do you think?" Vashtel was silent for a moment. Then she did something no Vorathan commander had done in recorded history. She inclined her head, a gesture of respect, learned from him, offered freely. "I think your species is going to change everything. I think the galaxy is not prepared for humans, and I think I am very glad that the Talon chose you rather than someone who would have used it for conquest. Silas looked out the medical bay's viewport. Earth turned below, blue and beautiful and fragile. What happens now? Now you go home, you rest, you heal, and when your world is ready, when you are ready, the Vorathin High Council will return to begin official contact. You will be part of that dialogue if you wish it. Silas thought about Port Lament, about the bridge, about the fog that would be rolling in right now, blanketing the town in its familiar gray embrace. I think I'd like to go back to the bridge, he said, for a while just to remember what it felt like before. Vashtel nodded. The Talon is waiting for you in the docking bay. It has been fully repaired and rearmed. It is, by every legal and cultural standard, your ship now. Use it well. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. One more thing, Silas Rook. The champion you faced, Gorek Varn, has submitted a formal request. He wishes to travel to your world, to learn more about humans. The High Council has granted his request on the condition that you serve as his guide. Silas blinked. He wants to come to Earth. He says he has never encountered a species worth studying before. He believes yours might be the first. Silas smiled. It was the first genuine smile he'd worn in years. Tell him to pack warm. The fog gets cold at night. 3 days later, Silas Rook sat on the edge of the ruined railroad bridge, his feet dangling over the broken concrete. Below him, the hidden chamber was sealed and empty, its purpose fulfilled. Above him, the fog was rolling in from the bay, thick and familiar. Beside him, Gorek Varn sat in silence, watching the mist swallow the town. Your world is very wet, the Vorathin warrior observed. Port Lament is wet. There are drier places. I would like to see them, eventually, for now this is sufficient. Silas nodded. The Talon was parked in a nearby clearing, its hull configured to reflect the surrounding forest. The governments of Earth didn't know he was back. That conversation would come later, with all its complications and demands. For now, there was only the fog and the quiet and the strange, scarred warrior who had yielded to a broken boy because that boy had refused to break. Gorek. Yes. Why did you yield, really? The Vorathin was silent for a long time. The fog thickened around them, muffling the world. Because I looked into your eyes and I saw something I had never seen in any opponent. You were not fighting me. You were fighting the concept of defeat itself. You were fighting the idea that you could be broken. And I realized that if I killed you, I would be proving nothing. Your species would send another, and another, and another, until they learned how to defeat us. Because that is what you are, isn't it? You are the species that learns, that adapts, that refuses to accept the impossible. Silas thought about the Talon's words, back in the ring. You are the most adaptable species I have ever encountered. Something like that, he said. Then I am honored to be the first of my kind to learn from yours. They sat together on the bridge, the drifter boy and the alien warrior, watching the fog roll in from the sea. In the distance, a lighthouse beam swept across the bay, cutting through the gray. Somewhere above the clouds, the galaxy was waking up to humanity's existence. But here, in the quiet and the mist, there was only the beginning of something that would take lifetimes to understand. The Talon pulsed gently in Silas's mind, a constant presence, a promise. Are you ready, bearer? Ready for what? For everything that comes next. Silas Rook smiled into the fog. Yeah, he said, I think I am.